to do that. So without further ado, we will begin our program. Tonight's webinar of recovery, empowering male survivors to hold abusers accountable. Few topics are more powerful and provocative to a victim of sexual abuse than holding their abusers accountable for a crime in which is committed against them. For the lifelong effects of being abused, truly each of us has a unique story, but to actually hold the abuser accountable, that is an emotionally charged topic that is complex to actually do. For some survivors, it might include the legal system, either criminal or civil or both. For some survivors, there are remedies that do not involve the legal system. Our panelists tonight will help us unpack these issues. The keynote panelist for us tonight is Greg Gianforcaro, an attorney who specializes in representing childhood sexual abuse survivors. Good evening, Greg.
Hi, Tim. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Greg, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney in the state of New Jersey for 31 years. I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up specifically in Mendham, New Jersey. And there may or may not be a lot of the participants that know that one of the worst serial pedophiles in New Jersey history was Father James Hanley. And he was my priest from the age of 10 to the age 20. And I was actually, me and my brothers were all his altar boys. And we served in the parish. And fortunately for us, we were never sexually abused. Unfortunately, many, I would say 3 or 4 dozen of my childhood friends were sexually abused and not so lucky by Father Jim Hanley. And when I grew up, when I became a lawyer, I got one case. It was my best friend's younger brother. And then when and we resolved that case. And then when the scandal broke back in January, the Boston Catholic Church abuse scandal, there were a number of the survivors from my hometown and my childhood got together. And then that really sort of took off. And since then, I've represented and resolved about 250 to 300 cases. It's been shocking and something I would never have thought of that would happen to me when I was growing up as a kid.
All right, thank you, Greg. There's a lot we want to get to you, and also I'm sure our attendees have questions, which attendees, you have a control panel at the bottom of your screen. You can submit a Q&A question to the panelists. There's also a chat feature, which we have open and available for you to use. And I have a couple of polls that are pre-programmed and ready to go this evening. Next, I want to introduce Alan Ruyle. Hello, Alan.
Hi, Tim. For the welcome attendees, thanks very much for joining us here this evening for this discussion. As Tim mentioned, my name is Alan Ruyle. I'm a psychotherapist and a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in San Diego, California. I'm also one of the newest members of the board of directors of MaleSurvivor, so I'm really excited to be here, be a part of this. For about the last 10 years, I've focused my work specifically on helping men with a history of sexual abuse, sexual assault, and other non-consensual sex. I work with men individually and in groups. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. Look forward to hearing what the attendees, the questions they want answered. And I also want to thank Greg for joining us and volunteering his time.
Thank you, Alan. And Nathan LaChine.
Hey guys, as everybody knows, I'm Nathan LaChine. I'm the webmaster for MaleSurvivor. I came here, gosh, almost 18 years ago. So it's been a privilege to really see us grow and change as a community. And over the years, this has always been one of those topics of, do I want to revisit the past and have accountability towards my abuser? What does that accountability look like? And what is the expectation that I want out of it? So I just feeling very privileged to be here for this webinar and very much appreciate that, Greg, you're here to answer our questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Nathan. And Ken Stockton.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. And I think we are really privileged to have Greg with us tonight. He's really been a recognized figure in helping survivors and in promoting legal reform in New Jersey. And he probably have some things to say about that as well. I am originally from New Jersey. I am an abuse survivor. I was abused starting at age 11 by a Little League baseball coach in Trenton, New Jersey. And I had lifelong consequences. And in fact, even in the absence of law that would have enabled me to sue my abuser or the organization he worked for, I did manage to hold him accountable. And I can tell that story in 1 minute, maybe later in the panel. It's a very interesting story. It's been a very amazing life journey for me. It took a lot of courage and a lot of anxiety and a lot of thinking, and it took me 40 years, but I did confront my abuser, and I can tell you it was more healing to me. I have been in therapy as well, but it was really a very healing journey for me to do that.
Thanks, Ken. And as by way of introducing myself, I'm Tim Kearns. I'm the host of your webinar this evening. I'm a survivor, and I'm also on the board of directors of MaleSurvivor. In 2013, I represented myself in filing a civil suit against an abuser after no other attorney would accept my case. I successfully moved it through the legal system to a satisfying conclusion while being a very powerful therapeutic experience, moving me from a victim to a victor. And so I just want to start with this question, and this is really directed to both Greg and to Alan. What makes the idea of holding the abuser accountable so powerful to the victim?
From a legal standpoint,
Yes.
And Alan can better talk about the emotional end, but when a client, a victim is a child and they're sexually abused, it's always a crime of secrecy. You know, they're always told, this is our secret, or this is between us, and don't tell anybody. And they live often with a lifelong shame of having participated in this just by this situation. In the legal situation, when they file a complaint and that survivor becomes empowered, that's the best process of the case, because that's the survivor taking back their power and control that they lost as a child when they were sexually abused. And it really can be empowering. Alan, what do you think?
I would agree with everything you said, Greg. I think empowerment, I love the fact that empowering and empowerment is the beginning or the real core of the whole structure of this webinar, because that really is one of the most important pieces. There is a very disempowering dynamic that goes into abuse. And most abuse survivors at the time feel very powerless, helpless, weak. They use all of these negative adjectives to describe themselves. And so anything that takes back some of that power, I think is very, very helpful therapeutically. Additionally, many of the men that I've worked with have come into therapy, many for the first time, never talking about their abuse before, feeling that they are responsible. And the part when they're able to get to this point that we can put the responsibility where it actually belongs, with the abuser, put that on them, and that process can be very liberating for the men who have carried so much guilt and shame for years, because they, in some level, blame themselves for not stopping it, for not doing enough, for not speaking up. So the empowerment and the shifting of responsibility, I think, are hugely important from a psychological standpoint.
Mhm. Right. Now, one of the issues to help clarify to attendees who don't already know this is that in the United States, it is a state by state law issue. And, Greg, I'm wondering if you could comment about that and help, I guess, point people in the direction they need to go to be able to figure it out for them.
Right. It depends upon the state where the survivor was sexually abused. That's usually the state that has jurisdiction over the case. And Tim, what we're talking about obviously are civil cases and not criminal cases. There are states that have different jurisdictional situations. New Jersey's pretty liberal in their jurisdiction, but New Jersey, the states that you really, if a survivor's looking to bring and file a lawsuit, they really need to connect with a lawyer, but find out which states which state, whether they were abused in, which state will allow them to bring a cause of action. New Jersey last year opened up their statute of limitations and had a 2-year window. It's a little more complicated, but there's a real movement. There are states, Arizona, California opened up their laws for a second time. States like Minnesota, Hawaii, Delaware have done it in the past. So it depends on which state, what the state laws are, whether or not you can bring a lawsuit. I know Pennsylvania there's been movement, but unfortunately it's not going, it's going slowly, let's say that.
Mm-hmm. And in Pennsylvania, it's nothing new is going to happen until 2021, when the new legislature gets in and has to approve by a vote to amend the Constitution. And so 1 of 2 years of that process has been done, but even after the 2nd year, it has to then go in front of the voters. So there's still some heavy lifting to do in Pennsylvania, but it does echo the issue that it is a state by state issue. Now, something that you said, I want to make sure attendees understand, is it's where the abuse happened, the state where it happened, not the state you live in presently. If you moved out of the state where it happened, it's about who has jurisdiction.
Right. In other words, if you were abused in the state of New Jersey, and now say you live in the state of Nevada, you cannot bring suit in Nevada. You've got to go back to New Jersey and hope that the state that you were abused in is a state that's friendly and has window legislation, that kind of situation. So it's the state, more or less. I mean, there are exceptions, slight exceptions. In other words, and what I mean by a slight exception is, say you were abused, you were a resident of New Jersey at the time, a priest, you were a parishioner in the state of New Jersey, and the priest took you to another state, hypothetically, because you resided in the state of New Jersey, because the parish was in the state of New Jersey, because the diocese and the priest were a part of New Jersey. New Jersey, in that situation, even though you may have been abused in another state, would likely have jurisdiction over that case. But that's a state-by-state basis situation. Know this, that no matter where the state, which state it is, all states have where the abuse occurred, that will be a state that has jurisdiction. So it can be pretty involved, it can be pretty sophisticated, pretty confusing, but the state that definitely where the survivor was abused will always have jurisdiction.
Right. Thank you.
I'm wondering, could you kind of, for our attendees, define, I mean, because this, I mean, I considered myself a pretty sophisticated person, and then when I decided I wanted to confront my abuser, a lot of the statute of limitations requirements and the window laws were mysterious to me. So could you explain the statute of limitations, and then when laws are changed with windows, what that window means. Because I know most laws, when they're passed, are prospective, not retrospective. They're
Right.
forward-looking.
Right. And one of the, I like to call the statute of limitations law in New Jersey the Mark Crawford law, because Mark Crawford, who's one of the panelists, was really the #1 guy at getting this law through in New Jersey. And I mean, he's been fighting this probably half his life.
Yeah, let me introduce Mark, because I just elevated him as a panelist. We were pleased to see that Mark Crawford was registered as an attendee, and so we reached out to him asking if he would mind if we brought him up as a panelist. Mark Crawford is a former MaleSurvivor board member, currently New Jersey State Director of SNAP, that's Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, has appeared as a guest on Oprah Winfrey's award-winning 2-part series, 200 Men Abused as Children, and is featured in the documentary Boys and Men Healing. Mark has spearheaded efforts to revise New Jersey's statute of limitations laws for the sexual abuse of children as adults, sexual abuse of children and adults, and resulting in the new New Jersey law enacted this year. Welcome, Mark. And if you will, share with us how you go about changing the statute.
Sure, Tim. Well, it takes a movement, right? So clearly, you want to get as many people as involved as you can, but there's many ways you can start. You should first approach a legislator in your state, right? And explain to them what your situation was and what you're trying to do, right? They can help explain the laws in your state and what access a survivor may or may not have, and what needs to change regarding the statute of limitations, or perhaps you want to change a notification law, or you know, sometimes some states have like tolling of a statute if the predator leaves the state after the crime is committed. So I would first reach out to the lawmaker and you know, ask them to introduce a bill that can be put before the larger lawmakers in the state, the entire state legislature, get a bill passed onto the governor, and then eventually become law. It can be involved, but it can be done. And there are bills in just about every state now today that are addressing revisions to statute of limitation laws in their state. So there's some websites like Child USA too that have a lot of information about each state and where their laws currently are. So look into that, find out. You can write editorials, op-ed, you know, to your local newspaper. Just get it out there, write to your lawmakers, ask them to help bring about change and explain why, tell your story.
So Mark, and thank you for everything you've done for survivors here in New Jersey and elsewhere, because it's had a cascading effect. What has it meant to you to see this through to this point?
Oh, wow. It is tremendous. It really has been my life's mission. When I came forward over 25, 30 years ago about my abuse, all the roadblocks were put up, and they kind of laughed and said, hey, you're not going to get anywhere. We're protected by these laws. And it really wasn't that I was seeking at the time. I wasn't even aware of it. Most people are not aware of some of the limitations they have, right? So I finally said, listen, I went to my local state senator, Joe Vitale here in New Jersey, and he heard my story, and I asked him to please help us fix this. And it took 20 years here in the state of New Jersey. We got it done right. It's a great bill, now law, that gives both children and adult victims access to the civil justice system. So it means, I can't say enough how important it is to me that this has been achieved, and how really grateful I am that others stepped in, saw, joined the cause, and together we got this done. No one person can do that.
Fantastic, fantastic.
But,
Ken, I imagine you'd want to get in on this conversation, Ken.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I was abused in New Jersey. I did, in fact, hold my abuser accountable in spite, and this was in 2004, in spite of the statute of limitations laws.
mm-hmm,
And I had no idea that these existed, actually.
mm-hmm,
And then, of course, I looked for the name brand attorneys in New Jersey who were filing for abuse victims that fell within the statute of limitations laws. And they didn't want any part of me. They you know, they have no case. Well, what happened is I have a friend in Ann Arbor, and he's an attorney. He played basketball with me as an adult. And he's kind of, I told him the story, and he wasn't even licensed to practice law in New Jersey, but he had a lot of compassion. And I'm sure, Mark, you encountered people in your journey that had compassion. Greg has tremendous compassion, and that's why he does what he does.
sure.
And he said, well, Ken, I'll help you out. And basically, he threatened a lawsuit. And the biggest threat that I had, these abusers are fearful of being exposed.
Right.
My abuser was living happily ever after. He was married. He had an adult son. He had completed a career in state government. I'm certain he was a serial abuser. I have no doubt he was a serial. Most of these guys are. Mark, you can speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I had in my weaponry, I'm a PR guy. I know how to use the media. So I said, so I demonstrated that I could hold him accountable. And at that time, after 40 years, I was fearless. I had fear because I think every abuser has fear. The abuser is bigger than life. In fact, Tim, if you want me, I can tell my little story in 1 minute at some point if you want me to do.
Hey, feel free, go ahead.
Okay, so here's the context. So I'm a PR guy, so I'm a storyteller, right? So in 2004, I did get to hold my abuser accountable. And then I thought it was beneficial to tell my story, for both to affirm myself and also maybe to offer some hope and some inspiration to others. So I don't know if people are familiar with the Moth. It's a storytelling program based in New York, nonprofit, and they have amateur storytelling events all over the US and all over the country, all over the world. So one night I decided, well, I'm gonna go to the Moth in Ann Arbor, I'm gonna tell my story. So it's actually competitive. 10 names are drawn out of the hat. I won that night. I won the Grand Slam in Ann Arbor. And then the Moth people invited me to come to New York City to their annual fundraiser, which is called the Moth Ball, with 11 other selected storytellers. And I had to tell in the Moth that they do, it's 5-minute story. I had to tell my story in 1 minute. So I have my story, I'm gonna read my story, and then I think I'll be quiet for the rest of the night. I don't want to take all the oxygen over. I wanted Greg to take the oxygen. He's got all the answers, but anyway, so here you go. It was 2004. I hadn't seen him in 40 years. Now he looked much older, less daunting. I asked Fred questions that had been on my mind forever. Why did you do this? Do you realize how much harm you've done? Did you target me specifically? Are you sorry? Back in 1959, Fred, then 23, was an excellent Little League coach in Trenton, New Jersey. He was my coach starting when I was 11. Fred also was a pretty proficient pedophile. He groomed me and then sexually assaulted me 400 times in 3 years. I suffered terrible lifelong consequences. In 2004, I became my own hero. Seeking to confront Fred, I tracked him down and threatened a lawsuit. He agreed to private mediation. We met, it was life-changing. I held Fred accountable for what he'd done. I went from victim to victor. No more self-blame, no more shame, much less pain. I am healing.
Fantastic.
So
Good job, Ken.
that was my journey.
Very nice.
So Alan, what would you put that in the context of a therapeutic experience?
You mean Ken standing
Yes.
in front of, oh, I think it is, I have said, and I know I've got a couple of my clients, I've been checking the attendees list. I know I got a couple of guys out there who have heard me say this 1,000 times. The thing, in my opinion, that moves a survivor forward more than anything else is speaking out, is talking about what they've been through, is being able to allow people to understand where you've been, and giving people the trust and the opportunity to respond in a supportive in a supportive manner. So I cannot think of anything more positively therapeutic than being able to stand up in front of a group of people when you're ready. I mean, it takes a long time to get ready, and some guys, for some men, that will never be their thing. But to be able to talk about and say, this was done to me, this is what I've been through and I survived, is one of the most powerful things that I think a survivor can do. And I want to add one, thank you. I want to add one thing, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I love the fact that we're looking at the legal aspect of this, but I think we need to be mindful that legal accountability is not available to many of the guys who reach out, at least the guys who are coming into therapy. Most of the time, the average age of guys coming into therapy to talk about this, in my experience, is between 40 and 60. For many of these guys, their abuser is deceased. For many others, it is a family member against whom they don't want to initiate legal proceedings. So if we have some time at the end, and I'm very grateful that Greg is here, but if we have some time at the end, I think it would be important for us to talk about how we work with accountability and being able to put accountability where it belongs for those for whom the legal system is not accessible.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm watching the questions come in on the Q&A, which I make available for the other panelists to see, and we're going to get to a couple of those. There's also the chat feature where I know that there's questions coming in on that, and I see that somebody was asking, is there a way that you can post all of the websites or the resources that we're talking about tonight or going to talk about? And in the moment, that's incredibly difficult for us to do because we're trying to be attentive to what others are saying and the questions that are coming in. But here is my promise to everyone who's an attendee, is that between myself and the other board members that are on this panel tonight, all of the Q&As, all of the chats, we're going to download them. And in the MaleSurvivor forum, we're going to make a topic. You can get over there tomorrow and see the link, and we're going to get a topic made where we can start responding specifically to every question and chat inquiry that we see here tonight. So in a moment, Nathan's going to take us through going over to the forum and about making an account if you don't already have one. But we'll be back with Nathan in a moment. There is a question that has been submitted, and it is this, and then we'll see what the panelists have to say about it. The question is, I was abused by my stepfather for many years. I want to confront my abuser, but am just starting the journey of recovery, and I am not sure if it's a good idea and what, if any, advice people have. I'm 33 years old, male survivor. So I'm going to add one bit of advice, and then other panelists can provide their take on it. My advice to you is form a support network, close group of people that have different life experiences, different skills, or just some people that you can rely on, because when you undertake this type of action to hold the abuser accountable, you really have to have your stuff together. If you're on drugs or alcohol, you have to quit. You cannot be messing around with any substances, in my opinion. And you need to have a good support network that you can rely on, because there are going to be some very challenging days. Any of the other forces that are not with you are going to be trying to tear you down and tell you how much of a bad idea this is. And you absolutely need to have some people around you that give you every reason to keep moving forward, even if you don't feel it yourself.
I mean, it's clear that organizations circle the wagons.
You got that right, Ken.
They circle the wagons when, and families circle the wagons, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And families circle the wagons. So it's very difficult. So from my experience, I can't really address either of those, but maybe Alan, you could address that issue, or
the issue of the
family member exposing
family members. Oh,
Yeah.
Well, I would go back to what Tim was saying a moment ago. I think one of the most important things for a survivor that is getting ready to confront a family member is to have a rock solid support system, whether that is a group of friends, whether it is other family members, whether it's a therapeutic relationship, and also being mindful of going into that confrontation process. The putting of responsibility where it belongs is the central act of what you are doing. That is the only thing that you have control over when you go into that. A lot of times when survivors go into this confrontation, what they're hoping for and what they're longing for is for the abuser to say, "I'm sorry, I don't know why I did this." It's not going to happen. I will say I have heard of it happening once or twice in my career, but that is the unicorn. Very few people find that. The overwhelming majority of folks who make this confrontation come back and report that the abuser says, "I don't know what you're talking about. You're out of your mind. That never happened." They deny it. One of the things I had a client one time talk about, he had this kind of confrontation with his father who abused him. And it was one of the most beautiful, confrontations I've heard discussed. The father did just that. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about. You're out of your mind. This didn't happen." And the survivor said, "I'm not doing this for you. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm forgiving you, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me, because I'm not going to carry this any longer. This is yours. You take it." And left that relationship at that point empowered. Again, back to that word in the title. Very, very, it was very good for him, and I've been so proud of him, hearing him be able to do that.
I remember I know Mark has something to say, but I remember when Jerry Sandusky was confronted on television and he took the position, not that he did it, but if they feel sad or upset, then I'm sorry for them. And it's almost like, and you guys know this a lot better than I do, but it's almost like he's throwing it back on them. And Mark, I know Mark has a lot, because I was talking to Mark at the time.
Well, Greg, you just made the point. It's true. Very often the offender will really try and put the shame back on the victim. And the victim often comes out feeling re-victimized, right? And that's why Tim and Alan and Ken were so right to say that you really must have a strong support network in place, and understand that the family may not be open to what you have to say at all. Oftentimes they're not. And your own healing cannot depend on where other people are at. You just need to be strong enough to deal with what comes when you step forward and find your voice and return the shame, the blame, and the guilt back to where it belongs, back on the offender. So I I couldn't say it any better than they've already said it. Just wanted to share that I've worked with many, many men who've approached family members, and that's it. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're a bit disappointed because they're not going to get what it is they're hoping for. And that's yeah, you know, you're right, we believe you. Now, there are other family members that have been supportive, but it's really important you have that support network in place.
Yeah.
Right. I was actually, you know, I know we've talked about acknowledging your story and telling your story. And one of the things that was really compelling and affirming for me was how much support and compassion I got from family members when I was more public with my abuse, from friends. There was not one person who blamed me. And actually, that's one of the struggles that victims have, is self-blame. Could I have done more to prevent this? Did I send a signal that? And then, you know, I looked at my Little League pictures when I was 11. I was a little boy. I had no capability of defending myself from a well-seasoned serial pedophile. Alan?
That raises a great question, and I want to actually, this is like tennis, I'm going to toss it right back to you, because one of the things I hear so frequently about from survivors who are considering this step, considering not just confrontation, but openly talking about their story. So I'd like to hear from Mark and Ken and anybody else who has something to add to this. The fear is, what happens if I let this out? Then they're going to use it against me. What would you say to men that you hear, you know, from your experience in telling your stories and in getting the feedback that you received?
I remember when I first told my story, I was totally petrified of my abuser, that he'd come after me, deny it. And being a member of the clergy, I just could picture all the parishioners rallying around him and not believing me. And I learned later from someone else that he was actually more petrified of me and telling my truth. And it took a while, but I learned, yeah, they're afraid of the truth. And it really changed my, you know, I felt really empowered then. And I told my story, and it was scary the first time, but I've never shut up since. So, you know, it was a tremendously empowering experience. It absolutely was a whole new level as I was going through therapy with my therapist. I really knew I'd reached a whole new plateau in my healing. And I'm glad I did it. It was important. I wished I'd done it much sooner, right? And yeah, that's what the abuser wants. They hold that power over you when you're afraid and terrified, and we remain silent and we keep it inside, and it gnaws at us and it eats at us, right? Until we find our voice and feel empowered. So for those who are ready, and it is, you know, you have to be ready, you know, to do it. Don't let somebody push you into it. When you're ready, tell your story and be safe. And yeah, there'll always be some that might, you know, but as in Ken's case, and was my case too, I was so afraid everybody would judge me. It wasn't the case at all. There was a tremendous amount of support, belief, and understanding. So don't let fear stop you from telling your truth, but you have to be ready and you have to have a support system.
Right.
When people have sought you out to represent them in civil litigation, were they at different stages of understanding their own abuse and being courageous, or yeah?
Sometimes they're, you know, you get the clients that are just want to keep quiet and don't want anybody to know. Then you have those who are angry, those who just are so upset at the situation where it's an emotional situation they just reach out and they just start crying. That's really difficult, but it's nice because they're reaching out to the lawyer. One thing that I did want to say, for those who are, you know, Ken, you said this earlier, that like families circle the wagons, institutions circle the wagons. And I would warn any survivor who was abused by, say, a teacher, a coach, a priest, that do not go to the institution to report, because it's my experience that you will not find a sympathetic figure within that institution, because they will circle the wagons. And in New Jersey, it used to be a very gray, up until the law changed, it used to be a very gray situation as far as getting around the statute of limitations. It was not impossible to win a lawsuit, but it was extremely difficult. But one of the things that made it more difficult in New Jersey was for that survivor who, say, like Mark, who was abused by a priest, if they went, their first inclination was to go to the church because they grew up Catholic, they believed in the church, so they feel as though that is their story will be accepted. But what those institutions will do is those institutions will use that statement and will use that knowledge and use it against the victim in a civil lawsuit. Mark, you agree with that, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it many, many times. And it's, I understandably, you know, many such victims of any institution, right? You're groomed. You, for some reason, have that attachment to that organization or institution, like you're a faith-based institution like your church. And that's what you think. Well, they'll fix it. I'm going to go to them. They're going to do the right thing. But I have seen time and time again, yes, they will circle the wagons and do all possible to protect its own self-interest. That has to change. Hopefully it will. But it's really important that if you're going to report, that you go to law enforcement and report, or speak to it, find a therapist, speak to your therapist first. It's really important, you be in a counseling situation if possible, find a good therapist. One that you really feel connected to, may not be the first one you've gone to, but find a therapist you really make a connection with. That's really important, finding good support, and then make those decisions.
Yeah.
Don't rush into it,
So we have attendees. Thank you, Mark. We have attendees who are asking both, how can I find a qualified, experienced therapist, and how can I find a qualified, experienced attorney? And they're both critical issues. MaleSurvivor has a therapist directory on its website, which we are in the process of improving. MaleSurvivor is currently undertaking, starting a legal directory of attorneys which have experience with working with survivors. And so, that's something that this organization is deciding that it's going to be one of its initiatives going forward, the legal directory. The therapist directory has been a longstanding initiative. I want to just give Nathan a moment to show our attendees how to get involved in the after hours chat, because we're going to finish at 8 o'clock promptly. And after he's done, I want to give the balance of the time to Greg to respond to attendee questions. But I'm going to turn it over to Nathan to show people about getting into the forum and the chat room after we're done here at 8 o'clock.
All right, guys. It's very simple to get into the discussion board in the forum. I've already sent everybody the link in chat. It's just forums.malesurvivor.org/register. So when you do that, you will you should see this screen. So you'll be, when you log in, you'll see it'll have your username and then all the forms that we offer. We're going to be in chat. So you just click on chat and then you click browse rooms. And then here is our after hours for Empowering Male Survivors webinar. So that's where I'll be for the next hour after chat.
Right. Thank you, Nathan. And also on that page is a link to donate. And we have a fundraiser going right now that is, Male Survivor is fully funded by individual volunteer donations from individuals like you and me. And so we are member supported and we really rely on donations from individuals. Ken and I spoke before the webinar tonight to say that we were going to put out this offer to anyone who wants to donate tonight, or by the time we wake up and look at it tomorrow, Ken, that we would match anyone's donation made tonight through the evening into the overnight, up till $500 total, so that we know what we're into it for. But don't let that stop anybody from donating. But we're going to match dollar for dollar up to 500 combined dollars of donations. So if attendees here tonight donate 500, Ken and I are kicking in $250 each. So $1,000 gets donated to Male Survivor. So you donate $1, we donate $1. It's like you donated $2. So please join us in supporting Male Survivor. So Greg, what is the process of contacting an attorney through? I mean, the question from one of our attendees is, can we hear from Greg, what's the process from contacting a lawyer to judgment? And it's a huge question, but
right.
How could you help that?
Well, what happens is when they reach out to the attorney, you want to hope that the attorney has a significant amount of experience in this field, because going through the legislation, going through the laws, it can be extremely complicated. I do want to say one thing Mark knows about is the fact that New Jersey's law on Friday was challenged. The constitutionality of the law was challenged. And I'm glad to say that we won the motion, that the church lost, that they lost, that in fact, Mark Crawford's statute of limitations law that was passed in New Jersey in May of 2019 was found to be constitutional. So that's a real big home run for us. And I want to thank Mark for helping out with the legislation on that. But what really happens at the beginning is you make that relationship with the attorney. The attorney, hopefully, you develop some type of relationship with that on a professional basis. And the lawyer will then ask you to sign a retainer agreement. And that is the type of agreement, it's a contract between the client and the lawyer on what to do, what steps can be taken, what are the rules between the lawyer and the client. And that is an ethical obligation for the lawyer to do, to follow through. So clients and survivors should not be offended at that, because there's always the element of trust. Do I trust this lawyer? And how come this lawyer is asking me to sign a piece of paper, obligating me to with the case? That's part of the process, and the survivor has to know that. Then, in certain situations, there is an opportunity where the lawyer can reach out to the other side with a letter, with a phone call, that type of situation, and occasionally, like with what Ken did, there's an opportunity possibly where the other side will want to mediate. And mediation is in an alternative to litigation. In some ways, and Ken, we were talking about the statute limitations. And for a lot of people like Mark and yourself, they all know, Tim, you know, but maybe those who don't, there are two types of statutes of limitations. And what a statute of limitations is is it's a time when the person has to file a lawsuit. Most states, if you're a victim of childhood sexual abuse, it's a period of time when the clock begins to tick and that clock says, you know, when the clock goes, that's your time. You have, okay, now it's almost like a starting gun. Okay, now the time begins for you to have to file a lawsuit. And a lot of the states that time begins when the child turns the age of 18. And it's a certain period of time when the child can sue, when the child, now an 18-year-old adult, can sue. And a lot of states have, say, hypothetically, like Connecticut had 7 years past the age of 18. So if the survivor was past the age of 25, he or she could no longer sue. And a lot of states like New Jersey said, well, we've got to do something about that because nobody at the age of 18 is ready to deal with their abuse. No, they're not even close. And statistics show that it's not until age 50 or 51 that the survivor is better apt to understand the nuances and muster up the courage. But anyway, that's when, and states like New Jersey were fortunate enough, like because of Mark, to expand the statute of limitations and create a window. States like Delaware, states like Minnesota, states like Hawaii, Arizona, California. So they've expanded the time to bring a lawsuit for the survivor. That's what a statute of limitations is. That's a civil statute of limitations to file a lawsuit. And then there's litigation involved in that. And there's the filing of the complaint. There's the process called discovery. And that can be very, very difficult. There's the process of giving a deposition. That can be difficult. But then there's also the process of the lawyer, the survivor's lawyer, deposing the other side. That can be very empowering.
Absolutely.
You'll never get an apology. You will never get an apology. But at least hearing them and putting them on the spot is good. And then hopefully, if the law survives or the case survives, there'll be an opportunity to settle. And then if not, the survivor or even the defense, the entity has the right, or the abuser has the right to have their case go before a jury. And that's the trial. And that's the ultimate outcome. Getting to that stage is very, very long. It's arduous, and it can be very difficult emotionally and legally.
And now that Greg has told you how emotionally draining it's going to be, I just want to give my perspective, since I've been through this, and I also had to act as my own attorney through all this, was that it was one of the greatest thrills of my life to go in front of a court, in front of a judge, look over at the defense attorney, turn around and see the old and decrepit abuser sitting there, knowing that I made him come into that court, and then proving him to be a liar. And while in the end, the judgment didn't go my direction at this time because of the statute in Pennsylvania, the judge did give me the opportunity to refile when the statute changes. That's as good of a case as I had presented, even though the law wasn't on my side. So I know that there was a question there from one of our attendees about, so if the statute of limitations expired, you have no recourse. Is that correct? What would you say to that, Mark? I'm sorry, Greg.
Well, Mark can say it too. I'll give the situation to Mark, because he and I went through this. Go ahead, Mark.
No, just there is, I would never give up, depending on the statute of limitations in any one state. As Ken was a prime example, right? Look, even if the laws aren't in your favor, it doesn't mean that institution or the offender won't settle because they don't want the disclosure. So never be afraid of taking that on. Yes, a judicial process, civil or criminal, is never easy. There's a lot of ups and downs. It's important to have that support network. But some victims really need to go through that process, want to go through that process. It's a level of closure. And if they're ready and willing to do that, they should. It's not going to be everyone, but there's many ways in which victims can speak out or, kind of put it back where it belongs on the offender, even in cases I've taken survivors to the cemetery, to their offender's gravestone, where they left a letter. Finally, they didn't have the opportunity while he or she was alive, but they wanted to have their say and speak their piece. So that's just one facet in which they felt like, I'm going to put it out there and put it back on them.
So Mark, I hope the letter was asbestos, so it didn't burn where it had to go.
There you go. I love that idea.
So we're bearing down on the final couple of minutes of our 1 hour program. And again, I want to let attendees know that get your Q&A in. Still, you can send in a chat. Look at the MaleSurvivor forum for the topic that we're going to create tonight and tomorrow, and start responding to things that we were not able to adequately get to this evening. Some of these issues, they do require some checking and some research to be, fully forthcoming about it. But I do want to bring this up because I see a lot of commercials, Greg, about if you've been abused, call this number, and it's some type of settlement agreement. What's going on with these kind of agreements?
Well, a lot in New Jersey with diocesan cases, cases against the 5 dioceses in New Jersey, the dioceses have set up a fund, and there are many dioceses throughout the United States that have set up a fund. And I would caution any survivor, because these funds are set up by the church as a way of not having to explain their situation or be held accountable in a court of law. And there are firms that see these funds, they have knowledge of the funds, and they encourage survivors to reach out to them for the sole purpose of having their case brought before the fund. And I've seen and I've spoken to survivors who've gone to these websites and spoken to lawyers and signed up with lawyers where the lawyers did not even know that the state had actually changed the law for survivors. So I would caution, really do your research into the firm that you select before you just call any lawyer. I'd really be nervous about that.
So Greg, how can people reach you? And again, we'll state that you're an attorney that's licensed in New Jersey, so you can only practice in New Jersey, but other attorneys throughout the country that have experience.
Oh yeah.
How can people reach you?
My website is gianforcarolaw.com, and they're welcome. They can navigate the website and reach me. My email address is gianforcarolaw@msn.com. And that's my email. It'll come right in. And my phone number, and I would caution anybody, if they don't get a call, it's possible it may have gone into the junk folder, which it happens to all of us occasionally. But my office number, and I will call back, is 908, area code 908-859-2200. That's 908-859-2200. Gianforcaro Law, that's a long last name, so,
Yeah.
But it's GIANFORCARO, the word law, LAW.com.
Yeah. Well, you're Greg to me.
Right.
I say, hey, Greg, and that's the Greg I'm talking to and talking about. And so I know Nathan is kicking out that web address to everybody. And also I want to remind anybody that's an attendee that in your original invitation and registration email is Greg's name, his information, and his website. So unfortunately, that brings us to a close of our 60 minutes. And but it's not over. If you want to go to the chat, when you leave this webinar platform, you're going to get taken to a survey. Please, encouraging you to respond to the survey. From all the survey respondents, we will pick 5 at random to get some MaleSurvivor swag, either a shirt, a highlighter, or a wristband of your choice. So we're going to be contacting a few people. So an added incentive as to why you should fill out the survey. It's a quick 60-second survey. And after the survey, you're going to be taken to the MaleSurvivor forum. And please join us for the after hours chat. Now I've got my chat hat on. And I see that Nathan does also, and I'm not sure who else is going to join us from the panel, but I hope that you do, and I hope the attendees do. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for this very special webinar, and we'll see you in the forum in a few minutes. Good night.
Thank you.
Empower yourself is what I would say. Empower yourself.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.